I'd like to start by acknowledging that the very first footprints on this continent were those belonging to Aboriginal people, and I acknowledge that I'm on the lands of the Wotjobaluk, Jadwa, Jadwajali, Wagaya and Yapalgalt people here in Western Victoria. I would also like to acknowledge the privilege of being able to live and work alongside the oldest living culture in the world, and I'm thankful for the generosity of the Aboriginal people in sharing this culture and land with us. I pay my respect to elders past and present and to all the Aboriginal people joining us today, and I hope that the children of today lead us to a better tomorrow. And in line with that, I'm going to be sharing some data from the School Entrant Health Questionnaire from Victoria over the past few years. So the School Entrant Health Questionnaire records parents' concerns and observations as their children start primary school each year. And all the data I'm about to share is available by doing a quick Google search, but we'll also share the link. This data is also broken down to local government level. We know that all Best Start sites use various data sources to inform their logic model development each year, and the School Entrant Health Questionnaire data is a really interesting source of information that's produced each year. And that's handy as you can also see trends. You'll see as they go along, in some areas there is a significant statistical disparity between all children compared with Aboriginal children. So it's hoped that this data may give you some ideas on the barriers to participation that may be facing Aboriginal children in the early years and inspire lots of ideas on how to work in genuine partnerships with the Aboriginal community to help overcome those barriers. So as I just vaguely mentioned, this presentation will look at Aboriginal children compared with all children. So this table shows that all children refers to roughly 50,000 kids, with Aboriginal children being just over 1,000 of that 50,000. And if you're paying a lot of attention, I've done some quick maths, and you're a little bit concerned about the top two numbers not adding to 100%, that's explained fully in that report that was linked on the previous page. All right, so to start with some Australian Bureau of Statistics data around socioeconomic disadvantage, this chart shows that for all children, there's a fairly even distribution of around 20% living in each of the 5 socioeconomic areas from highest disadvantage through to highest advantage. However, 63% of Aboriginal children live in areas with high disadvantage and only 6.5% live in areas of highest advantage. So now we're going to take a look at some of the developmental measures. Aboriginal children are twice as likely to be reported as having difficulties with speech and language, consistently sitting at 28%, compared with around 15% for all children. Interestingly, parental concerns about their child's eyesight is continuing to rise in both classifications on this slide, but the gap between Aboriginal children and all children is starting to widen. Now this chart looks at PEDS pathway A, and I'm sure many of you will have a better understanding of what that means than I do, but it's summarised as children at high risk of developmental and or behavioural problems, and we can see that Aboriginal children are consistently overrepresented, consistently around 32 to 33% compared with all children at 22 to 23%. As you can see, we're already seeing some of the potential barriers that we can work together to overcome. But if we're going to look at the disparity in this data, it's important that we take a moment to reflect on the bigger picture.
The story of our communities, people and nation starts a long, long time ago. More than 60,000 years, in fact. This was when our culture and our law first started to thrive. We knew who we were and where we belonged. We took care of each other, our land and our waters. We ate food that made us healthy, lived on country and abided by our laws and song lines. Our families, our children were happy, with strong minds and hearts, because they were where they belonged. But then, everything changed.
Colonisation came, bringing wars, disease, famine, violence, and the destruction and violation of our cultural laws, sacred sites, families and communities.
We were denied our knowledge, language, ceremonies and identity. The very things that tell us who we are and where we belong. And our connections with each other and the land grew weak.
And then our children were taken from us. They had their names changed and their identities stripped away. They were told that Aboriginal people were bad. Worse still, they were told that their parents and grandparents did not want them.
For years this happened, and those children became known as the stolen generations.
Our children were denied love and experienced physical, emotional and sexual abuse. This left very deep, very complex and very real wounds, leaving scars that are still being felt personally, socially, spiritually and collectively.
In the time when our story started, we were able to parent in the cultural way that has seen our families survive and thrive for generations. Our people were strong, and our culture flowed and healed us in times of hurt.
But since the trauma of colonisation and the stolen generations, we have not been able to heal in the same way. And we have unknowingly passed this trauma on to our children through sharing our sad stories and having them witness and experience our pain. This is known as intergenerational trauma, and we see symptoms today in broken relationships, disconnected families, violence, suicide, and drug and alcohol abuse.
But this
That video gives a lot of food for thought, and we'll actually return to that shortly. But here's another link that we'll share that you might be interested in checking out that further explores the connection between colonisation and some of the challenges intergenerational trauma presents today. This slide looks at reported stress levels in just the month prior to the survey being conducted. And now I'm not going to actually talk through the following slides. I'm going to let the data talk for itself. But as you look at it, I do want you to remember that these events were reported in the 12 months prior to the child starting school, so in their year before school kindergarten year. And as you see each one come up on screen, I encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the impact of each of these events in the lives of our littlest people. And most importantly, to remember these aren't just numbers, these are children and families we see every day in Victorian early years services. So now the data is going to look at the reported history of family issues rather than what's happened in the past 12 months. Now, with even a basic understanding of how adverse childhood experiences negatively impact people through to adulthood, it's clear to see the potential negative impacts on health, education, and life trajectories of these data sets. Given the previous data sets, this final piece of data is not all that surprising, with almost 20% of Aboriginal children at high risk of significant clinical problems related to behaviour and emotional wellbeing. I guess the exciting thing, and the reason we're all here today, is the Best Start partnerships are well placed to make a difference, as partnerships involve all the key organisations that are able to affect positive change, particularly Aboriginal community-controlled organisations. And when we take a moment to reflect on data like this, it's also good to consider whether we have all the right people around our partnership tables, people that are committed to action and listening to Aboriginal people around how we can do better. The Aboriginal community has a deep understanding of the issues facing community and an absolute wealth of experience on how to positively overcome those issues. By listening meaningfully to the Aboriginal community and respectfully working together in genuine partnerships, we can all play our part in supporting better outcomes for Aboriginal children. And as I mentioned in my acknowledgement, we have the privilege to walk alongside the world's oldest living culture. 65,000 plus years of experience, strength and wisdom is a pretty decent resume on creating strong, thriving communities. I think it's such an honour to be able to listen to that wisdom as we open ourselves to changing the way we work to positively impact the trajectories for Aboriginal children.
In the time when our story started, we were able to parent in the cultural way that has seen our families survive and thrive for generations. Our people were strong, and our culture flowed and healed us in times of hurt.
But since the trauma of colonisation and the stolen generations, we have not been able to heal in the same way. And we have unknowingly passed this trauma on to our children through sharing our sad stories and having them witness and experience our pain. This is known as intergenerational trauma, and we see symptoms today in broken relationships, disconnected families, violence, suicide, and drug and alcohol abuse.
But this is not where our story ends. We still have strong minds and hearts, and we still know who we were and where we belong. By creating safe and strong communities together, supporting our families to be free from pain, returning to our culture and building a strength of identity, we can stop the cycle of trauma and bring about positive intergenerational change so that we can continue to thrive for the next 60,000 years. There are simple things that we can all do to help heal our trauma.
Visit healingfoundation.org.au to find out more.
And I just want to leave with one question, and that is, what role will you play? Thank you.